What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Good morning. Let's talk about injuries today because I have one and it's on my mind to speak about it. So injuries in weight training, injuries in running, injuries in cycling, whatever your chosen sport is, injuries can definitely become an issue, especially as you get older. It just happens. And I'm 27, so I don't want to think of myself as getting older, but it's quite possible that I don't have as young a cartilage and connective tissue as I did 10 years ago. Darn. But let's talk about injuries for a second here. So oftentimes injuries come as a result of a few different factors. One can be overstimulation, overtraining, and I don't like to really point the finger at overtraining oftentimes because overtraining is pretty hard to do. A lot of people just assume that they're overtraining and stop making noises, phone. And let me just turn that sound off here. And overtraining is not as easily done as people would like to think. I think they use that as a scapegoat oftentimes to not train as hard as they should. So I tend to not point the finger at overtraining. The most common way to cause injury is poor form, lack of proper form. See this a lot, especially with people that are just starting to do an activity, whether that be running or lifting or whatever that may be. They're just starting to do it. They haven't really, their biomechanics haven't adapted to that specific movement. Like it's a foreign thing to them. Like their body's not adjusted to it, their mind's not adjusted to it. They don't have the mind-muscle connection, and oftentimes injury is a result. Especially with really complex compound movements like an overhead press or like a conventional deadlift or something like that, like a squat. And if you don't know what you're doing there and you're overextending part of your body, injury is very much a possibility. So that's probably the most common way to have an injury. When I normally get an injury, it's usually a result of just a compounding effect of overstimulus tied in with a deficit of some sort. So if my calories are very low, I'm more prone to injury. If I'm sleep deprived, I'm more prone to injury. If I'm just doing more activities of different types all at once, I'm more prone to injury. And right now that pretty much sums me up in its entirety. Like I'm running in tandem with the weightlifting, and I'm not getting enough sleep, and I'm not in a caloric deficit per se, but I'm not really in a caloric surplus for me either. I'm still taking in quite a few calories, but my baseline is very high, and I'm definitely beneath that baseline right now. So I'm kind of like the perfect storm for an injury for me right now. And it's funny because I was going to make this week a deload week. A deload week is basically a week that you take every 6 to 8 weeks usually, where you don't stop training, but you scale back the intensity of your training, you scale back the weight you're moving, and you scale back the volume a little bit, and you just focus more on form, more on the muscle contraction, and not so much on hitting the heavier moves. So I was gonna make this week a deload week because I'm gonna be out of town the latter part of this week, and it seemed like it would be a good fit. It's been a while since I've taken one. It seemed like it would be a good way. And this is kind of a proactive way to prevent injury. But at the same time, I was thinking in the back of my head, I'm getting married later this month. I'm not gonna be at the gym for like a week there. I'll just make that my deload week. So I was hesitant to make this my deload week, and I wish I had because I injured myself yesterday. And it's funny because oftentimes when you have an injury, it's not from like a heavy squat or a heavy deadlift. For me, I injured myself doing body weight bench dips. So just simply putting my feet elevated up on one bench, my arms behind me on a second bench, and doing body weight dips. I normally put weight on my lap. There was no weight, it was just simply my body weight. So I did not feel like that would be a dangerous movement by any means, but I felt it instantly when it happened. My knee gave out, my right knee, and it feels weird. It feels like my knee is not out of socket because there's no socket there so much, but it feels like my IT band's all jacked up. It feels like my right knee's all jacked up. It's hard for me to like really contract my hamstring like I should, or keep my leg locked out like that. There's pain in that. It's just frustrating because again, I'm going out of town this week and I need to be able to move, and I feel like I'm limping right now, and I obviously don't want to be putting a damper on my workouts. Like today I did back and I had to scale back on my deadlifts because I didn't want to risk further injury of that knee. And oftentimes when you have an injury, there's basically two different ways to go about it. You can kind of play both ends of the spectrum here. neither are really good. You can stop training completely, stop stimulating completely, and give your body total and complete rest, which is what a lot of people opt to do. I don't recommend that, because having some sort of stimulation, having some kind of blood flow into that joint, into that injury point, is going to help further recovery and expedite recovery. The other end of the spectrum is to just train through it, bullheadedly, and not scale back at all, and just kind of mind over matter, crush it, so to speak. And that's oftentimes where I gravitate to, but as I'm getting older, as I am realizing that I'm more prone to injury, I'm not really wanting to do that anymore either. I tend to still do that, maybe on a lesser scale, but that's not really optimal. You kind of want to find a healthy mix of the two. You want to scale back, definitely, but at the same time, you don't want to not exert the muscle, exert the joint at all, because that's going to prohibit recovery as well. So I'm kind of in a catch-22 here, because I committed to running every single day until I hit 10 miles, and I ran yesterday on this injury, and it definitely felt off. But with running, it's weird. You start running, and after like mile 1 or 2, everything just kind of falls into place, and it's like it doesn't even hurt anymore. You just keep going, and it doesn't really hurt until the next day. So that's what I did, and honestly, that's probably what I'm going to do throughout the weekend. So hopefully it finds time to recover at some point. That's not optimal. I'm not recommending it. I'm not recommending that. That's just what I'm doing, because I committed to doing it, and I'm stubborn and I'm bullheaded sometimes. And when I commit to doing something, that's one of the instances in which I'll work through the pain, for right or for wrong. It's just me. But I have kind of definitely determined to make this week a deload week, not try and push it too hard on the rest of my lifts. And I'm taking a couple days off this weekend because I'll be out of town and not have access to a gym. So that is my little take on injuries. Be smart with your injuries, be mindful of your injuries, recognize that poor form is the most common cause of injury, so make sure you know what you're doing. And then if it's a perfect storm of depletion, whether that be calories, sleep, overstimulation, combination of all of the above, recognize it for what it is, be mindful of it, and act proactively towards preventing injury. I do recommend having an active deload week every probably every 6 to 8 weeks, like I said. So this is going to be a deload week for me. And that is all I have to say about injuries. So I will check back in with you soon.